Well, in a little over a month, we get to see the government's latest financial plan. And our next guest says the fiscal budget update can be a pivotal turning point for Canadian startups. So we're joined in studio by Abdullah Snobar, Executive Director and CEO of DMZ Ventures. Good to have you come in. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the budget coming out November 4th. What are you hoping to see that pertains to startups?
Well, look, first and foremost, there's three things that we want to cover, but tomorrow's problems in Canada cannot be solved by yesterday's old business models. So Ottawa needs to think about supporting startups and not just the incumbents. And what does that look like? We're talking about three areas specifically. Number one is ensuring a true, proper Buy Canadian strategy that actually includes Canadian startups in the procurement process to ensure that they are able to provide their solutions that are built in a much more effective and efficient way that can actually help solve for some of Canada's biggest challenges and crises. The second thing we're looking at is almost an unintentional innovation strategy around the defense spending. This has been a big talk with the Prime Minister and understanding how can startups leverage into the defense tech space and defense spending space and leveraging dual-use technologies. You know, in some cases, how do you build an application that can be leveraged by you and I, Lindsay, and then also be leveraged by our security forces and military here in Canada. And then lastly, a proper and true IP to commercialization strategy for Canada. And so that we stop giving away our IP for pennies on the dollar to global buyers that are seeing insane amount of value from Canadian IP.
Okay, so that's a forward-thinking approach, as
Correct.
you say. How optimistic are you that you might see all three of those or one of those in the budget?
Look, I'm an optimist by nature, and I think the Prime Minister has been very clear that this is a time for Canada to really step it up and make sure that we are leaders in this space. To me, it would be impossible to do a lot of that without incorporating technology and innovation and the startup community that has become thousands strong in this nation. And not have them included in the budget that's coming up in early November. So I am optimistic, and I do see that there will be some significant changes to how the government will fund innovation. That being said, we will find creative ways of incorporating startups, you know, in things like defense and in things like Buy Canadian, hopefully, and we will push that message out with a laser focus on making Canada the best place to be and the best place to build.
I believe John O'Connell, our guest host today, CEO of Davis Wright, is joining us as well. I think there he is. He's still here listening in. John, do you want to jump in as well with any questions you might have on this?
Yeah, you know, I found your last point particularly poignant, and I agree with you on everything. But one of the things that I think is going to be a major problem for you, and maybe I'd like to hear your answer to it, is, you know, how do we stop selling our IP for pennies on the dollar? If you're venture funding and you're funding, the government has to see a return at some point, and investors need to see a return at some point. How do we keep that IP in Canada? Do we have export control rules? How do you stop shareholders from selling to the highest bidder?
Yeah, look, a big part of it comes down to incentives, right? In Canada, we've been very used to funding research dollars and making sure that that's been the primary focus for how we support post-secondary institutions. There hasn't been much understanding or focus on what actually happens post-research and how do we get more incentivized models around commercialization. How do you get people to be able to come together to actually take some of the IP from a Canadian landscape and keep it within Canada and support their growth? We have a number of instruments in this country that can actually create, whether it's venture capital or even looking at procurement as a way to incentivize people to build on their IP. In many cases, the procurement strategy is a bit of a lost cause for young companies, right? They realize even if they build a business, the chances of them capturing the biggest single customer in this country, the Canadian government, is almost impossible. If we create an avenue and channels that would actually allow companies, small businesses and startups to realize that when they build, they can actually leverage the Canadian government as a big customer that would build credibility around the world, I can guarantee you that will change the dynamic of people wanting to take their IP to commercial or just selling it for pennies on the dollar. So it's got to be more intentional. It's got to be more thoughtful. And this is really part of where the government plays a big part in that strategy. Otherwise, as taxpayers, we are enabling the government to continue funding research, but never seeing the actual result or the fruit of that investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you anticipating, though, any cuts to small businesses or startups?
Look, the Prime Minister has made it clear that there will be cuts to innovation broadly. And, we're still not completely sure what that means, although he has pointed towards cuts in youth innovation, cuts in equity deserving groups from an innovation lens as well. But like I said, where one door closes, another door opens. And we're now shifting the narrative around. If that's happening, and we recognize that Canada needs to invest billions of dollars every year towards defense spending, what percent of that spending can be used towards innovation beyond just traditional kind of military needs, and how do startups play a part in that, right? So a good example of this could be, Lindsay, that dual-use technology has always been a major play in south of the border. They've been able to figure out how to take commercial products or that are used by civilians and then apply it from a military perspective. The best example I can give in Canada, we have great companies here that are building drone technology, but it's used primarily for retail sale. Can we take that same technology and deploy 10,000 drones to the Arctic to do Arctic surveillance for 24 hours? And that's something that we can consider from a startup perspective on how we can support Canadian companies.
Okay, Abdullah, it's so good to have you in today and get your insight. Really appreciate you coming in. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was Abdullah Snobar, Executive Director and CEO of DMZ Ventures.